Hey everybody, this is Rafe, and this is episode 29 of Have Not Seen This, a weekly in-depth look at a much-beloved movie, selected specifically by our guest that they're a little surprised when they find out people have not seen. Welcome back for another episode. Hope everybody is doing well out there. Hope you're still staying inside and following all the guidelines that have been laid out and staying healthy, and that we can get through this as quickly as we can by working together. I want to spend some time talking about some good stuff this week. So I want to start out by congratulating some of my colleagues, some of my past guests, some of my friends for achievements that have been brought to light over the last week. I want to start out. I have had Thomas Mariani and Adam Thomas from Double Edge Double Bill on the podcast in the past, and referenced them numerous times. They referenced this show. We're all really good friends, especially Thomas and I. We go way back, and they hit their 100th episode of Double Edge Double Bill last week. If you go to their feed this week, of course, they're up to episode 101. And I really enjoy listening to their show. And I want to send them heartfelt congratulations on 100 episodes. You guys are awesome. I love your show, and listening to you guys on a weekly basis is a big part of why I decided to dust off the microphone and get back into podcasting. So congratulations. Good job, guys, on 100 episodes. Secondly, D.E. Metis is a guest I had on in the past, and when he was on, he was talking about his podcast, Metis Pod, which hadn't had a new episode in quite a while. He was trying to rekindle it and said he'd have a new episode up in a couple of weeks, and unfortunately that didn't happen, but a new episode did go out last week. It is storytelling, short-form storytelling, really interesting to listen to. If you don't have time to read a short story, but you want to listen to one, he does some great production work over there, and I highly recommend that as well. Fans of the old podcast will know that my music over there was done by a good friend of mine, B. Bagby. He has a band called Einstein's Monkey that does like child-friendly type music, and they just released a new album, their first in quite a few years. The press release says Wash, that's the name of the album, Wash, is a full-length album with 9 tracks all dedicated to washing hands, rather appropriate in the time that we're in. Of course, we need to wash our hands for about 20 seconds, so each track is about 20 seconds long. The whole album is just under 3 minutes long. That's got to be some kind of record, right? I don't know. I would assume that's probably some sort of record, but I know that their new album, Wash, as well as their previous episodes, are all available on Spotify. I highly recommend you check out their work. B did me a great service by allowing me to use his music back in the old days of the podcast, and I loved taking my little son when he was younger to see Einstein's Monkey perform in concert. I'm really excited that they've got a new album out. And then finally, Podchaser is one of those websites that's kind of a directory for podcasts. You can find new podcasts through that, and they're putting out an offer through the next week through April 16th that every time you leave a review for a podcast, they're donating 25 cents to Meals on Wheels. And if the podcaster responds to the review, then they double it. So a quick way to make money for a good cause, one that's in particular need right now, and I'm sure some money headed their direction would be a great service to them. So head over and leave a review. It has to be at least 20 characters in length. It has to be unique. You can't just copy and paste the review from podcast to podcast. You can review the podcast as a whole, or you can leave reviews on individual episodes. I'd love it if you head over there and review my show there. I'll guarantee you that I'll respond so we can double that donation, but you can find just about any podcast you listen to in their directory. Leave a review. It doesn't have the same impact that something like Apple does, but in this case, you're raising money for a good cause. So I encourage you, go over there, leave some reviews. I know I will be doing that later this week to raise money for a good cause, but also to give some of the podcasts I listen to some positive feedback, and that it's got to help their spirits as well, right? So we move from those to our Friday inquiry from last week. Last week, of course, we talked about The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and I talked about how my response to that movie changed from the first time I saw it in theaters to rewatching it for the podcast last week. And so the Friday inquiry question I posted on social media last week was, what's a movie you had a drastically different reaction to in different times? Over on Twitter, Emily of Why This Film Podcast replied with, I used to think Queen of the Damned was the greatest movie ever made. Oh, Emily, I'm sorry. You poor soul there. Chris Talent says, I'm probably going to get shit for this, but the original Blade Runner. I don't know what that means. Like, you used to think it was good and now you think it's bad, or vice versa. I'm not sure, but okay, sure enough. On Facebook, James Rodders Rodriguez said Jennifer's Body. Early last decade, I saw it and wrongly dismissed it as dull fodder to appeal to horny teenage boys. I rewatched it last year and it felt like watching a whole new film. A witty piece that was ahead of its time, feeling very relevant along Me Too news. And past guest Laura Huber said Testament with Jane Alexander. Saw it the year it came out in 1983 and thought it was thought-provoking and interesting. Saw it again on cable, probably 2005, after I was a parent of 3. I was crushed and devastated. I literally wept for 2 weeks. I could not imagine the pain of the lead character watching her children die slowly. A huge difference in perspective between each viewing. And as I even noted when I talked about it last week, having kids definitely changes your perspective on things. That was my big reaction with the example I used from House. It certainly has changed my perspective on many things, and I'm not surprised to hear that that has had impact on other people as well. As always, the Friday Inquiry goes out on Fridays, figure that, on social media. You can find us at Have Not Seen This on Twitter and Have Not Seen This podcast on Facebook. Turning to this week, I said I wanted to do some lighthearted films, and this one came in right before I put that request out. I appeared a few weeks ago on Real Rundown and invited both of the hosts of that show to come on this show, and Price Ashe took me up on it, and he came with his choice of Fletch, which again he chose before I specifically said I wanted to do some lighthearted films for a little while to kind of help raise spirits, and this one certainly fits the bill. It is a movie, as I reveal in the episode, I had not seen before, and I really enjoyed watching. We have a great conversation, not only about Fletch, but about other Chevy Chase movies, about the potential that there has been since the 90s for a Fletch sequel or reboot, and we generally have a lot of laughs and a really good time. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Here we go with 1985's Fletch. I was listening to one of your episodes the other day and had a really weird kind of thought process listening to it.
Okay.
And it was one of your early week episodes where you're going over the stuff you've been watching.
Sure.
And like you listed off 2 or 3 or 4 TV shows that you've been watching. And admittedly, I know you've been home more. You've had time to like binge watch stuff.
Yeah.
But I was listening and I'm going, how the hell does he have focus for all of these shows? And then I started thinking, well, that's how we watched TV in the old days.
Yeah.
We had 5 or 6 or 7 shows that we watched because we only watched them once a week.
Right.
So it kind of entertained me the way our thought process has changed, that now I'm just like, well, this is the show I'm watching right now. And I watch it until I'm burned through what's available, and then I'll move on to the next show. But you don't do that.
No, I mean, one of the reasons I don't do that is because of the nature of our show. Because if I'm talking about the same show every week, people aren't going to they're going to get tired of that. So I try to watch a bunch of different stuff. And half of the shows I'm talking about, like I'll burn through like 5 episodes in a week or something. And then it'll take me a couple weeks to finish the actual series or the season or whatever. But I want to be able to watch new stuff every week, so I have something new to talk about on the podcast. But that's kind of how I've always been. I of course latch on to 1 or 2 shows and watch them all the way through, but I have a lot of different shows I like to watch because I get tired of watching the same thing consecutively for a long time. I mean, The Office is an example. Like, I got myself burnt out on that show. I love that show. But every once in a while, I have to balance it out with a drama, Breaking Bad, or right now I'm watching Ozark, or I'm watching Westworld. But I like to mix it up because I like to get a lot of different narratives at the same time. But yeah, that's kind of how I've always been.
Yeah, well, and as I said, that's the way it used to be. It's just the way we tend to approach television now has changed so dramatically that it cracked me up that my first thought was, how do you keep track of all those shows? And then, as I said, it dawned on me, oh, wait, that's a new mindset than what we used to have.
Which episode were you listening to?
I haven't gotten to this week's yet, so it was last week's.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've got a lot of extra time on my hands right now, so I have been watching more than I normally do.
Yeah, I should add in that this is going to be like the tightest turnaround I've had from recording to air in quite a while. So any current references you make will still be current when it goes to air. So,
When do you plan on putting this up?
Oh, this week it'll
Okay,
be on.
nice.
It'll be the next one. Which actually, I'm going to use you for before we'll get to the movie.
Sure. Yeah. Well, hey.
I'm going to use you as a point of defense or a point of throwing myself on my sword. I'm not sure which.
Uh-huh.
So in my last episode, in my intro, I talked about how I was just sick and tired of all the Tiger King memes and just how pervasive that show has suddenly become into our culture. And I know you talked about it on this week's episode, even though I haven't listened to it yet.
Right.
So the comment I made was that it's just so stupid.
Yeah.
And one of my good friends who runs another podcast, I've been on his podcast, he's been on this podcast, he called me out for that calling it stupid is kind of being dismissive when it's actually an intelligently assembled documentary that just happens to be about stupid stuff.
Sure. And stupid people.
How do you describe Tiger King? Because I know you actually have gotten into it.
Well, I guess I come from a little bit different because I knew about this story and I was quite familiar with this story. I mean, I've known about it for about a year because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I mean, obviously, I'm a podcaster, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. And there's a podcast I listen to called Over My Dead Body, which is a true crime podcast because everybody who listens to podcasts has to have at least one or two true crime podcasts they listen to, which I have like 8 different ones that I check in with every once in a while. But this is one that's I think is really well done and put together really well. Each season's about 10 episodes, but the last season they covered the Tiger King story. So I was already familiar with it. And so going in, I knew what was going to happen. I knew what to expect, although they did throw some new stuff. Have you watched it yet?
No, I'm not going. I don't want to watch it. I feel like it's
dude.
I feel like it's stupid.
It's not stupid,
and that's what I got called out on because I dismissed it as stupid, and I guess I should have said stupid content.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, do you watch any true crime? Do you like true crime at all?
Yeah, I mean, I watch some. It's not at the top of my genres, but if it's interesting, like Making a Murderer, I really got into when Netflix did that.
So if you like Making a Murderer, I think you should definitely watch this show because it's 100%. It's 100% about a different. I mean, it's kind of about a different person, but it's really not because Making a Murderer is about a pretty stupid person. And again, maybe I shouldn't say stupid, but he's not a very smart individual. And neither is Joe Exotic. Joe Exotic does a lot of stupid things, but it's approached from a very true crime lens, I guess. And it's really well put together. It definitely expands on the story I already knew, and it adds some new players that are kind of peripheral players. They're not really involved in the main storyline, but they are connected to Joe Exotic in some way. So it's kind of cool to see them, and it's just kind of cool to go into this world of, I wouldn't say underground tiger breeding, and because it's not really underground, it's fairly above ground. Most people knew about it, but it's an industry. It's an industry you don't see and you don't really know about unless you're in it. And it's really cool to kind of take a bird's eye view into that industry and also the kind of the main players within that industry, because you see a lot of different main players besides Joe Exotic, and they're all batshit crazy. All of them. But yeah, it's very similar to Making a Murderer in that, like, you get to know these characters and they're all insane, but just the way it's put together and the way the story is told to you, you can't take your eyes off of it. You can't, even though I knew the story, I knew everything that was going to happen, everything. I still had to continue. We binged it in 2 days. I still had to continue watching it because I was like, oh, am I going to learn something new? Which I did learn some new things. But overall, I mean, the ending was the exact ending I knew was going to happen, but I was still fascinated by the way they told the story. So I really think you should watch it, especially if you like Making a Murderer.
All right. I'm not saying you've convinced me. But you've made a case for it, and I feel like maybe you have a little more fairly represented it on the show. So, Thomas, I hope you're happy. So you asked me about true crime. So you're kind of an enigma. And given I haven't been listening to your podcast very long, but you're kind of an enigma to me. Like, you had me on your show to talk about Onward, which is now available on Disney Plus, by the way.
Oh,
you had me on there.
Nice.
Yeah, it just came out today. You had me on there to talk about that, and then we did a top Pixar movies, but you're not a Pixar person.
Right.
And then, like, you did a Vin Diesel episode, and the movies you picked for that were really interesting to me. So what's your jam? What movie genres are you into?
I'm into everything, dude. There's literally nothing I won't watch. And to give you an example, this week I watched Urban Legend and Urban Legends 2 Final Cut. Like, I'll watch,
God.
and they were terrible. But I
liked Urban Legends.
No, I agree. Like, the first Urban Legend, like, it's fun, but I was on Letterboxd earlier and rating it. I think I gave it 2.5 stars. It's not a good movie, but it's fun. Like, I like movies like that. I like everything, and just some things resonate with me more than others within a particular genre, but I don't have a genre that I gravitate towards more than others. Now, I'd say probably like romantic comedies and stuff like that. I don't necessarily gravitate towards those, but there are outliers within that genre that I love. One of my favorite movies of all time is La La Land. That is a musical romantic drama. Maybe I wouldn't even consider it a comedy.
Fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy, romantic, everything. But that is probably, if it's not in my top 10 movies of all time, it's 100% in my top 20. I love that movie. It's my favorite movie of that year. But yeah, I don't really... I try not to put myself in any kind of box as far as genres go, because I get into everything.
Okay.
But it has to be a story that really speaks to me or sucks me in. Because there's plenty of true crime that I've tried to watch that I didn't care for and I never finished, or listened to that I never finished. So I like everything.
Okay. So kind of jack of all trades, master of none type thing.
Yeah,
I dig that. So then you probably have ample answers for my next question, which is, the concept of the show is those movies that you're surprised when other people have not seen.
Yeah.
What are your have not seen movies? What are the ones you haven't seen that people are shocked by?
Okay. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because Sunday, I'm going to be a guest on another podcast, which is kind of the opposite of your podcast, called Now You've Seen It. And they pick a movie and they say, hey, anybody that hasn't seen this, let us know if you want to be a guest and watch this movie. And the movie is Blade. I've never seen the original Blade. Oh. And the thing is, I own the Blade trilogy, but I've never watched any of it. I bought it at the flea market because I'm a big flea marketer. I bought it at the flea market for like $5. And I was like, oh, that's a great buy. All 3 Blade movies on DVD. It's like the box set. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to watch them. They look pretty cool. I like Underworld. I like Marvel. I'm going to watch that because it looks like kind of a mix between Underworld and Marvel. But I still have never gotten around to watching it. So I said, yeah, I'll record that, or I'll watch that and review that with y'all. But other movies like that, Platoon is one of them. And I hate to say it, but I own Platoon too.
You sound like me. I have a vast DVD library, and many of them are movies I never got around to watching.
Well, I would say 95, maybe 93% of the movies I own, and I do have a vast library as well, I have seen. But there will be these times where I go see a movie and I'm like, oh, I got to watch other movies that are like that. And so I'll go to the used DVD store, or I'll go to the flea market and I'll buy a bunch of movies that are like that. And I'll watch like 2 or 3. And then I'm on to the next fad or next thing. And I forget about that. And I just haven't gone back and watched it. Like, I bought Platoon after I saw Dunkirk, because I'm like, oh, I want to watch a bunch of war movies. So I went and bought that, I went and bought Full Metal Jacket. I went and bought Hacksaw Ridge. I went and bought a bunch of stuff. And Platoon is Platoon and Apocalypse Now are 2 that I own that I still have not watched. And I know it's a tragedy that I haven't watched those, because I know they're 2 of the quote unquote best war movies, but I still have not gotten around to watching them.
Personally, I'm not a big fan of Platoon.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen it. In fact, I reviewed it on the old show. I believe we did a month of war movies, but Apocalypse Now, I absolutely love.
Okay.
I'm a fan of Heart of Darkness, which is the novel, but it's a slog to read. Like, it's got some great ideas, but it is thick to read. It's not something you can just sit there and enjoy. You have to work at reading it. And part of the reason I like Apocalypse Now is I feel like it's a much more user-friendly version of the story.
Okay.
And now it's not a direct, adaptation.
Right.
It's lacking, but yeah.
Gone with the Wind, never seen it. Honestly,
you've never seen Gone with the Wind?
I haven't, and I'm not in any rush. It doesn't really seem to appeal to me. Okay. But I've been shellacked for that, especially by my wife for not having seen that. I'm trying to think of what else I haven't seen. I mean,
Well,
there's
that's a
plenty
good
of
list.
classics I haven't seen, but I try to every once in a while. If I'm I have to be in a mood to watch an older classic movie.
Right.
I've never seen Godfather 2 and 3 because I didn't like Godfather 1, and so I never continued watching it.
Well, 3, most people will tell you not to bother with 3, and I kind of agree with that. But 2, in my mind, is the best of the trilogy. Yeah, I love 2. Yeah. Although I had never really sat down and watched Godfather in its entirety. I'd seen it in bits and pieces, and about a year and a half ago, I sat down and watched it in entirety and realized a lot of the things that I like about Godfather 2 are there in Godfather.
Okay.
So they're kind of redone in Godfather 2, which I find really interesting to see how I feel about Godfather 2 now that I've had that full experience.
Interesting. Yeah. I keep meaning to go back and watch Godfather because I watched Godfather when I was in high school, and I don't think I was mature enough to really comprehend the whole thing and appreciate the whole thing, because I love gangster films, but Godfather is not one that resonated with me. I love the films of Martin Scorsese. He's my favorite all-time director, and I mean, many of his films are gangster films, and I like some of them more than others, but I love all of his films, and there are other gangster films I love as well, but that one's one that just didn't resonate with me. Same with like Scarface. That didn't resonate with me, and frankly, I genuinely don't like that movie. I've watched it a couple times, and I probably will never watch it again.
I own but have never seen Scarface.
Really? So that's one for you.
But you know what else I had never seen?
What?
Fletch.
Oh, really? Oh, my gosh. Okay, nice. So
really let's use that to transition into our conversation today, which is about Fletch from 1985.
Yes.
Directed by Michael Ritchie, written by Andrew Bergman, based on the novel by Gregory MacDonald, starring Chevy Chase, Dana Wheeler-Nicholson, Joe Don Baker, Richard Libertini, and Tim Matheson.
Oh, for God, Don.
What is this man saying? What is this man doing?
What in the hell's the matter with you?
What is this man's name?
My name is Igor Stravinsky.
Hi there, I'm Harry S. Truman.
I'm Don Corleone.
They call him Fletch.
Fletch!
Fletch, F. Fletch.
He's good at defending himself.
Better tie your shoelaces.
Oh!
Disguising himself. And getting himself into trouble.
Well, it be Fletch. Go ahead. Make my day.
He's a reporter.
There are no tags on these mattresses.
Who's about to write the story of a lifetime.
Will you kill me?
Sure.
If he lives.
Thanks a lot!
There isn't a woman he can't charm.
Can I borrow your towel for a sec? My car just hit a water buffalo.
A question he won't ask.
You and your wife are currently alive, I take it?
Drop your shorts and bend over, Mr. Babar.
A risk he won't take.
Probably feel 100% Moon River.
To get to the truth.
It looks like you two have a lot to talk over. We'll just catch the last 10 minutes of Dynasty.
Universal Pictures presents Chevy Chase as Fletch.
My hero.
Welcome to it.
So yeah, I had not seen this movie before.
Really?
I'm not the biggest Chevy Chase fan.
If I could just reach through this mic and slap you in the face, I would. I'm a huge Chevy Chase fan.
I mean, I've seen him. Like, I really enjoy the National Lampoon movies. You know, that's obviously kind of what he's best known for.
Sure.
But like, I didn't like Funny Farm.
Yeah, Funny Farm is not one of his best. I enjoy Funny Farm, but I'll more than willing to admit it's not one of his best films. But yeah, I'm a huge Chevy Chase fan, so I'll pretty much watch anything he's in, and I haven't seen everything he's in either. But yeah, I agree. Funny Farm's not the greatest.
So Fletch, I was about to start describing it, but the first question, of course, is how do you describe this movie to someone who hasn't seen it? How do you sell someone who's not seen this movie on seeing it?
So it's about a smartass chameleon detective, or not detective. I mean, he's kind of a detective, or he's taking the role of a detective, but he's a investigative journalist, which is basically a detective. Smartass chameleon investigative journalist who has been hired to kill somebody that says that they are terminally ill, but he doesn't believe this guy's really terminally ill. So he starts investigating this guy, and a bunch of other stuff unravels from there. But it's very absurd. But it's just such a funny film. And it's got a really good storyline too. It's one of those comedies that is not just stupid, which I feel like with a lot of Chevy Chase stuff, it's kind of stupid comedy. But this has a really good storyline, great music, great acting. I mean, supporting cast is fantastic in this movie. I think the writing is really well done. Yeah, I mean, I know I kind of got off on a tangent there, but that's kind of how I would describe it. I mean, that's how I would describe it. At least Fletch himself is just kind of a smart-ass chameleon investigative journalist.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd agree with you on great music, but the rest of it, yeah, totally. That synth soundtrack is so 80s.
I love it, yeah. But I grew up, I'm born in 1990, but I love 80s movies. It's weird. And I love 80s music in movies. The synthesizer, it's my jam.
Now, you mentioned the supporting cast. Do you remember some of the other movies you said you were thinking about before you finalized on Fletch?
Yes. So I was thinking about Matchstick Men. I was thinking about, what was I thinking about? The Naked Gun. What else did I say? I can't remember. I think those are the only two that I remember off the top of my head.
I thought you had mentioned Blade Runner.
Oh, yes. I had mentioned Blade Runner as well. And
so it cracked me up that you have M. Emmett Walsh in this, and you have William Sanderson in
William
this.
Sanderson. And I had forgotten. I knew M. Emmett Walsh was in this, which he's in a bit part, but he's hilarious. And then William Sanderson, they could have gotten anybody to play that role because he was in, 30 seconds of the movie?
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, I completely forgot he was in this. And I was like, oh, shit, that's the guy from Blade Runner. I had to look up his name because I couldn't remember his name. But yeah, I did not realize that. And there's a bunch of little stuff like that in this.
Oh,
like, Uncle Phil. Uncle Phil shows
I wondered
up
if you recognized him.
Yeah. And I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, I was shocked when I realized that's who that was. So you listed all those movies that you had been thinking about. Why Fletch is your choice? Why did you settle on this one?
So this is a movie, again, I'm a huge Chevy Chase fan. I grew up on Chevy Chase and that kind of style of humor. I grew up on Chevy Chase. I grew up on Leslie Nielsen in Naked Gun. I grew up on Airplane, National Lampoon's Vacation. I just grew up on a lot of that stuff. And so those are movies that I hold dear to my heart. And when I talk to people and they haven't seen Fletch or even National Lampoon's Vacation, I get deeply offended. Not really deeply offended, but it shocks me because in my opinion, Fletch is a classic. It's one of those classic comedies that you have to see. And that's why I chose it. Plus, I was just kind of going through my library of films, and I was trying to pick out films that I love, that I've talked to a lot of people and that haven't seen. And this is one that stuck out to me.
Gotcha. So what is your history with this movie? Because you said you were born in 1990. This is, older than you are. How does someone born in 1990 come across this movie?
I got to give all the credit to my father. My father introduced me to Fletch and to a lot of the great comedies that were made before I was created. So I got to give him all the credits. He introduced me to this, like I said, Naked Gun, Blazing Saddles, which was another one that I thought about choosing because that's probably my favorite comedy of all time. But
which also has a connection with this one. You have Burton Gilliam
playing
from Blazing Saddles, playing a bit role here as a mechanic.
Yep. So that was another one I thought about doing as well. But that one, in this day and age, could be a little dicey talking about. So I chose not to do that one. But yeah, my father introduced me to a lot of great comedies like Fletch. And this is just one of my favorite ones that he introduced me to.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's interesting you made the comment about dicey, to talk about. This movie is not exactly pure from that. I mean, I was a little shocked that it pretty much opens with the hint of police brutality.
Oh, yeah.
That definitely. The black character, his nickname is Gummy. Well, we don't see it till later, but at the beginning, Gummy comes into the frame. You have George Wendt from, Cheers fame playing Fat Sam. And they're talking about drugs, and Gummy shows up and says, the cops did this to me. They're always beating up on me. And he's got a black eye.
Yeah.
And this is 85, and they're making a commentary on police brutality, which then again we see later in the picture. I found that really interesting. And then you have a dream sequence where Fletch is imagining himself as one of the LA Lakers with a giant afro.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like that is particularly PC for today's times.
It's not PC, but honestly, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Really?
Yes, I think it's hilarious. And I, like I said, I grew up on Blazing Saddles. I grew up on Mel Brooks, who is not PC at all.
No.
That's kind of my style of comedy. If I'm watching something that's not aiming to offend everybody, I don't find it that funny. I like stuff that literally is trying to offend everybody. Like, I don't know if you listened to our recent review of The Hunt, but that movie is very much trying to offend everybody of every political spectrum, and I loved it. So yeah, I like stuff like that, and I thought it was very funny. And yeah, I agree, it's not PC, but just seeing Chevy Chase with a big afro biting somebody on the arm is just hilarious.
Yeah. Well, and this one comes to me at a really interesting point, because the last couple of movies that have been picked, they're not going to air before this one, but they're comedies. But they're comedies from the late 60s, early 70s. And that was a very different approach to comedy than, say, the 1980s or today even. And it feels like we've really moved toward comedy is this set 'em up one-liner, set 'em up one-liner, set 'em up. And that's not how it was in the 60s, 70s era. So it was suddenly a very different aesthetic than I had with the last couple of movies I've watched. On top of that, I've discovered, we did a couple of comedies early in the run of this podcast, and I talked about I don't really go to the theater to see comedies, and it's something I probably need to change about my own viewing habits. But because most of the time I'm watching these comedies alone, I don't tend to laugh out loud at them. Like, I'll chuckle or I'll smile. And I have to admit, I laughed out loud quite a few times watching this one.
Good. What scenes in particular did you laugh out loud at?
Oh,
or lines in particular. Or if you wrote them down. I mean, if you didn't, that's fine.
I had stuff like, "Are you a cop?" When he gets in the car and he's driving with the teenager. Are you a cop? As far as you know. Just that was really funny. Or the monologue he's doing when his prostate's being checked.
Right. And then he starts singing Moon River.
Right. Like, that cracked me up. And it's just that very wry one-liner delivery that Chevy Chase has really worked for me here. But it's also it's a really clever film beyond just his one-liners. I mean, if you think of the concept of the movie. So the concept of the movie is he's an investigative reporter trying to do a story on drug trade at the beach. And because he's there on the beach, and because he's the right person or maybe wrong person, he gets picked up by this guy who wants him to kill him.
Right.
I want you to murder me is specifically what he says. And it's like, that would be a really interesting plot.
Yeah.
A homeless guy is picked up by a rich guy who wants him to murder him for $50,000. But then on top of that, the plot is made more complex and more interesting by the fact that he's not a homeless guy. He's not a bum. He's not a druggie. He's an investigative reporter.
Right.
And that adds this whole other element to the picture and to the narrative that you wouldn't normally expect. And I found it's not just that it's a funny movie, but that it's a clever movie in places.
Yeah. And it's sort of a detective noir film a little bit as well. Packaged in this 80s comedy packaging.
Yeah. I mean, there were aspects of it. I took a class when I was in graduate school that studied different genres. And one of the genres we spent a couple of weeks on was detective stories. And we had to read several novels and watch several films. And there are aspects of those projects here in this 1985 comedy.
Right.
So it definitely has more sophistication to it than you would, or at least than I would anticipate just, looking at it. So it's judging a book by its cover kind of thing,
right,
which apparently I was wrong to do.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that, and I think it kind of helps that this story came from a book as well. So
Right.
it was a detective novel before it was turned into this 1980s Chevy Chase vehicle.
Now, have you read the original book?
I have not. I'd love to find them and read them. From what I've heard, the movies, or at least the two Chevy Chase movies, are not that faithful to the books. I think they lift the basic plot, but then they of course add that Chevy Chase wry wit and sarcastic humor to it, which I don't know is as prevalent in the book as it is in the movie. I think a lot of this is Chevy Chase-ified, if you will.
Yeah, my understanding is the novels are a lot more cynical.
Yeah.
Not as light as the movies are. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. I found it really interesting. One of the things that cracked me up, I will admit, is his use of pseudonyms throughout the movie.
100%. That's probably my favorite running gag. That and the whole Underhill thing. Those are my two favorite running gags in this movie. And I always go back to those whenever I'm thinking about this movie.
Well, let's talk about the Underhill thing in a second, but some of the fake names he gives out, which apparently the way this was filmed is they did the old typical one by the script and one for you kind of thing, which allowed Chevy Chase to ad-lib quite a bit.
Right.
And a lot of these pseudonyms were him ad-libbing.
Right.
So among the ones I wrote down, Ted Nugent, Babar, as in, the children's book character. And that was another line.
Oh, yeah.
Was, I understand that that's a kid's book about elephants. I wouldn't know. I don't have any. You don't have any children? I don't have any book about elephants.
Yes. I wrote that line down as well.
Igor Stravinsky.
Yep. I wrote
G. Gordon Liddy. Don Corleone.
Yes, Don Corleone, and then he starts talking about the other people in the Godfather as well.
The Harry Green's out of the picture, but Fredo and are cleaning things up. Yeah, I love that.
What about Dr. Rosenpenis? I mean, Dr. Rosen.
Yeah, Dr. Rosen. That was the first moment I audibly laughed was when he looked at that board of the doctors and they're all Dr. Rosen something.
And then he says, "Oh, Dr. Rosenpenis." It's so funny.
Which I read an interview with him, and most of that scene was not scripted in advance.
I'm not surprised.
The idea of the whole board of Rosens, that was something he came up with the day that he showed up and they were getting everything set up to film, and they were actually laying out the doctor names on there, and he said, "Why don't you have them all be Rosen something?"
Oh, okay. I figured that was probably in the script, and then he just ad-libbed the name he gave, but that's
no, he had them do that so it set up him ad-libbing the Rosen something.
Right.
So I mean, it's the fake names. It reminded me of the TV show Psych.
Yeah.
Where he is often giving out just absolutely ludicrous names.
Yeah.
But here it's almost, it's partially, I mean, knowing that he was ad-libbing them, it's partially what could Chevy Chase come up with, but it also almost feels like an intelligence check to the people he's talking to.
Sure.
Because if he can tell you I'm Ted Nugent and you don't bat an eye at it, then he knows where your level of awareness or intelligence is.
Yeah, and at the end when Tim Matheson is pointing the gun at him and he calls him Mr. Nugent, I thought he was calling him Mr. Nugent out of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but saying it in the way that like he knew the jig was up, like he knew that he wasn't really Mr. Nugent. Then I was kind of surprised that he was surprised when he finds out that his name is actually Fletch. I thought that was kind of funny. So yeah, that does really speak to how smart these characters are.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was a really funny reoccurring gag. The other gag you mentioned that also is quite well done is the Underhill account.
Yes.
That he sees Underhill just treating the waiter like absolute trash at the club.
Yeah.
And so he gets his revenge just by charging everything to Underhill's account.
Right. And I love when those two waiters come to the little bungalow or whatever and drop off the food and the wine. And he's like, "Here, give each other $20 and charge it to the Underhills."
Yep. Yes. And I almost wish they hadn't had Underhill finding out about it there in the middle of the picture, because I felt like it was something they could have carried on. But then they do.
They did. Yeah, they did at the end.
Yeah. So it was like, good comedy. The rule of comedy is a rule of threes, that everything is repeated 3 times, and that certainly applies there. That you have him do it the first time when he's first at the club, then the second time when he comes back to the club, and then Underhill discovers it, so you don't think there's going to be a third. So it actually sets the audience off, like you're not going to get that third. And then when you get the third, it's even more satisfying that it's like, oh yeah, okay.
And I had completely forgotten about that. So when that happens, it felt fresh to me.
So my other question, you mentioned Tim Matheson, holding the gun on him. Tim Matheson plays the rich millionaire here who is hiring him. Yeah, Stanwyck, who's hiring him to murder him. Who's hiring Fletch to murder him, Stanwyck. Right. And my first thought when I saw him is, does Tim Matheson ever play a good guy?
I think I saw him play a good guy. He played the father in like an ABC Family movie once. I'm not joking. I really do think I saw that back when it was called ABC Family. But God. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think so. Usually he does play kind of like the sleazy bad guy. Usually a sleazy rich bad guy of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to, and especially like I just watched a couple of weeks ago for the first time a movie for the show that apparently is just never going to happen, but Van Wilder, and he plays Van Wilder's dad in that. So like that was fresh in my mind of then coming into this, and he's the bad guy here.
Yeah,
it was really funny to me. So this is interesting. I just pulled up his filmography to look and see, and just
bad guy in Animal House.
Just a general note for you that I know you'll appreciate based on a recent episode of your podcast. Right. He's a voice in Fast and Furious Spy Racers, the cartoon.
Oh, God. Is he the villain in that?
I don't know because I haven't seen it, but he's General Dudley. That sounds kind of like that's going to be a bad guy.
Like a villain. Yeah, sounds like a villain 100%. Well, I won't be watching that. I mean, yeah, if you listen to the podcast, I love me some Fast and the Furious. Even though they're terrible films, they're very enjoyable.
I love them.
But yeah, that I won't be watching.
Yeah, I'm just used to him being like, I remember seeing him in like the Brady Bunch movies, or I guess the second one.
Okay, was he the villain in that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's been a while since I've seen those. I know I've seen both of them, but I don't really remember them that well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I off the top of my head, and I could sit here and look through his filmography, I'm sure, and find somewhere where he's played a good guy. But he's just one of those actors where he's been associated with a bad guy so many times that you just automatically, that's where your brain goes when you see him on screen.
Right.
He's going to play a bad guy. He's going to be a villain.
Dang. Yeah, I'm sitting here scrolling through his filmography as well. He's been in so much stuff.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Oh, he's a working actor.
He's certainly working. That's for sure. He's been around for a long time. But yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than that. I was trying to find the name of that ABC Family show or movie. But other than that, no, I can't think of anything he's actually played the good guy in. But yeah, I feel like he would be good as kind of like the typical father role in a show or in a movie. But yeah, he's always the villain.
I'm Elisa Lucas from Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits. I'd like to start a movement where we spend more time loving on our friends because although friends are important to us, they're often in the shadow of other relationships. So if you want to love on your friendships a little bit more, embrace friendship a little bit more, or just appreciate your friendships a little bit more, then this podcast is for you. We'll explore all the different ways friendships take place, share the amazing stories of friendship, and discuss best practices for the difficulties that friends may experience. It's time to embrace friendships because without our friends, who would we be? So check out Best Forevers on iTunes, Stitcher, and all the other podcasting listening venues. And be sure to follow Best Forevers Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
So to talk a little bit about some of the other supporting cast, because we started talking about that. Gina Davis is here in a supporting role.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got more screen time than most of the other supporting actors, but this is definitely before she, hit it big on her own.
Oh, for sure.
As we said, George Wendt is in this. Joe Don Baker plays the chief of police.
Yeah.
Him. He has a, pretty decent career as well.
Yeah.
Burton Gilliam, we mentioned. James Avery, who played Uncle Phil in Fresh Prince, is a cop here. I mean,
this was his fourth film role.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was looking it up because I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head. I just wrote down Uncle Phil, and I was like, yeah, I should probably use his real name on the podcast. So yeah, I looked him up, and I was like, wow, this is his fourth film role. He's considerably skinnier here. Still not a skinny man, but yeah, he looks quite a bit different, much younger than he does in Fresh Prince. But yeah, I was surprised to see this was his fourth film role.
Yeah. So one of the advertising mechanics of this movie was the idea that he's a investigative reporter who changes identities more than he changes his underwear.
Right.
You know, that he's frequently in different disguises. And I have to admit, I was a little disappointed with that aspect of the movie, that a lot of the disguises really aren't more than him just putting on different clothes and going by a different name.
And fake teeth.
Yeah,
and
he has the fake teeth.
The bloody nose.
Which I didn't really think was all that much of a disguise, other than just giving him a talking point.
It's not. But there was, especially when he's got the fake teeth and he's talking about the
ball bearings.
The ball bearings. Yeah, I need a 30-pound ball bearings. Like, ball bearings? What do you need ball bearings for? Yeah, yeah, you're right. They're not that big of disguises. I think if you watch Fletch 2, Fletch Lives, the disguises get a little bit more over the top. They're a little bit more of disguises, but you can still always tell it's usually him. But yeah, I'd agree with you, but I love the use of pseudonyms and the different professions he's trying to fake.
Yeah, the one disguise I will say is the last disguise he uses in the movie.
He looks like his editor.
Oh my God. It's like really an impressive disguise. He's wearing roller skates at the beach. He looks like a homeless guy wearing roller skates is about the best way I could sum it up. But
I love when he shakes his ass.
It does not look like Chevy Chase.
No, it doesn't.
All.
It doesn't. They did a good job at first. I mean, it's been probably 5 years since I've seen this film. I've probably watched it all together in my life probably 10 times, but it's been a while since I've seen it, which is another reason I chose it. But I love when he's skating down there. At first, I was like, "Is that the editor?" Because it looks like, what's his name, Libertini. I can't remember his first name. Richard Libertini. It looks a lot like him. Then as I got closer, I was like, "Oh, this is definitely Chevy Chase. He's dancing, he's acting goofy. He knows that those two surfers sitting there are actually cops watching for him, so he shakes his ass at him." I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, I agree. It was very good makeup.
Yeah. So is the sequel worth checking out? Because again, having not seen this, obviously I haven't seen the sequel.
Yes, it's not as good as this movie. It's a bit sillier. He's moved out to, essentially the basic plot of that movie is some distant relative of his dies and leaves him, because he's the only relative left, I guess, leaves him this house out in the middle of the country. And the plot of this movie is this giant mega church run by Arlie Ermy, who's this mega church pastor, Joel Osteen type, is trying to come in here and buy all this land and build a mega church. And he goes undercover basically and to try to find out the sketchy dealings of this mega church. So it's definitely enjoyable. It's definitely different from the first one. It's not just a retreat of the first one, which I appreciate in sequel comedies, because a lot of sequel comedies are pretty much just the same movie over again, a la Hangover 2, which I like Hangover 2, but it's still not great.
I really want to berate on the Hangover movies. I loved the first one, and I really want to hate on the sequels. And then I found out that Craig Mazin, who won an Emmy last year for Chernobyl, he was one of the screenwriters on the Hangover sequels. And it's like, I really appreciate and respect him. I love listening to his podcast. But dude,
see, I like the first Hangover sequel. I thought it was, if you had just made that movie and not made the first one, I would say it, in my opinion, it's close to as funny, but it's the exact same movie, just they took it and moved it to where they moved to Thailand. Yeah, it's the exact same movie, but I did think it was funny. The third one I think is atrocious. They should have stopped.
I haven't seen the third one. The second one, I haven't seen it since it was in theaters, but I distinctly remember coming out thinking it was almost identical to the first one, except for I felt like I needed to Clorox wipe every part of my body having seen it.
What, just because it looks so dirty?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I don't remember why I had that thought. I just remember having that thought.
That's funny.
And I'm not really interested in revisiting it to determine why. But yeah, so it's not a retread of the first one. Now,
no, it's not.
There's been a long time brewing third movie.
Yes.
That has been stuck in developmental hell since about 1990.
Yes.
Kevin Smith was on board. At one point, it was going to be with Chevy Chase. Then it was going to be without Chevy Chase.
Jason Lee is possibly the lead.
Yeah, Jason Lee, Ben Affleck. At one point, it was Kevin Smith doing it with Zach Braff playing Fletch, and then Kevin Smith dropped off the project, and Zach Braff's director, creator Scrubs, Bill Lawrence, stepped in, and then that's fallen apart since then too. So it's like the latest version I heard had Jason Sudeikis attached to it.
Yeah.
Do you even want a third Fletch film? Especially without Chevy Chase?
I don't necessarily want a third Fletch film, but I think at this point, if they're going to make a new Fletch film, it's going to be a reboot. It's not going to be related to the first two, or at least I hope it's not, because those are, in my mind, they're kind of sacred ground. Don't try to make a sequel or a prequel or whatever you're going to try to do to those movies. Just start fresh. Maybe change the tone a little bit. Nowadays, kind of action comedy is big. Add some more action in there. I'm perfectly fine with that. I like a good action comedy. But no, I don't want an exact sequel. But if Jason Sudeikis is playing Fletch, I'm 100% down. Because as far as nowadays, Jason Sudeikis, in my opinion, is kind of the closest we have to a new Chevy Chase. I know he hasn't had the same success as Chevy Chase has as far as in movies go, but I think they have very similar comedic sensibilities. So I'd love to see him play it. When they were talking about Jason Lee, I thought Jason Lee would be a good pick. Ben Affleck, what the hell were they thinking with Ben Affleck? You kidding me? But Zach Braff, I thought he would have been okay too. But as far as Jason Sudeikis, I think is the best choice. I've always thought if they were going to remake National Lampoon's Vacation, which they did, I thought that Jason Sudeikis should have been Clark Griswold, because I think he can do the best I don't want to say imitation, because he is his own comedian too, but he's very similar to Chevy Chase in my opinion, which I wish they had gotten him for the Vacation sequel.
I was just about to ask, didn't they? But then I realized that's not Jason Sudeikis.
That's Miller's, which is basically kind of a vacation movie. It's his own vacation movie, which I like Where the Millers quite a bit. I think it's very funny.
It's Ed
Helms, which I like.
Ed Helms,
but he's no Chevy Chase. His style of comedy is totally different, which it didn't work for me in the remake of Vacation. It was fine, but it wasn't great.
Wouldn't you be worried with a remake about it being just too different from this version of Fletch? I mean, I don't know if maybe they make it and say, oh, let's stick to the novel and make it more cynical. But I don't feel like our time period would accept, as I said, like the gag with him in the afro, that's not going to play today. No. And I just wonder about how many other changes they'd have to make.
Yeah, again, that kind of stuff, I think that was probably more Chevy Chase than it was from the book. I mean, if you've read anything about Chevy Chase behind the scenes of like the show Community, I think he's fairly un-PC in real life too, even now. So I think a lot of that came from him specifically. So I don't know. They'd have to certainly not include that kind of stuff nowadays. But yeah, I'd be okay with a new Fletch movie, and I'd be okay with it being very different from these Fletch movies. I don't think they need to shoot for this style again. Of course, I want them to keep the kind of smart ass, sharp wittiness of the character that Chevy Chase created. But as far as the world around him and the story around him, it could be a little bit more, I guess, like you said, cynical or even darker and grittier. which I sound like I'm talking about a new Batman movie. But talking about Batman movies, I mean, they've always made new Batman movies, and they've always changed them a little bit differently. There are plenty of James Bond is another character that they've constantly made movies about, and they've constantly reboot that property, and they've been successful at it, and they've changed a little stuff every time they reboot it. So I think it can.
So you think Fletch can be in the same category as Batman or Bond?
No, not exactly. I know it's a bold statement. I think that kind of detective character, yeah, I think it can be done a lot. I mean, look at the what is it, Perot? Yeah, look at that kind of stuff. That character's been done a million times, and he was kind of done again with Knives Out, even though that's not the same character, but it kind of is the same character. That kind of character's been done a bunch of different times, and Fletch is kind of like that. He's a investigative detective journalist kind of thing. So it's a type of character that's been rebooted and done a bunch. So yeah, I think it can kind of be like that. Obviously, it's not like that yet, but I'm 100% down for a Fletch sequel, reboot, or whatever.
Well, it just dawned on me that I kind of completely jumped over the critical review side of things. So just kind of really quickly hit the reviews at the time. It does sit at 77% at Rotten Tomatoes, at 68% at Metacritic, so it's fairly popular towards it. Mm-hmm. But the reviews actually had a point, I guess we're kind of already talking about. Roger Ebert, I always like to use Ebert. He provides the negative review for this.
No.
And he wrote, the problem with Fletch is that the central performance is an anthology of Chevy Chase mannerisms in search of a character. Other elements in the movie are pretty good. The supporting characters, the ingenious plot, the unexpected locations. Mm-hmm. But whenever the movie threatens to work, there's Chevy Chase with his monotone, deadpan cynicism distancing himself from the material. And later in the review, he said Fletch needed an actor more interested in playing the character than in playing himself.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I fully agree with that, because I feel like the character of Fletch, I mean, obviously he's still got the kind of quick-wittedness to him, but I feel like the character of Fletch is definitely different than other characters he's played as far as Clark Griswold goes.
What I found really interesting is that Chevy Chase, he doesn't acknowledge that per se, but when he's asked what his favorite role is, he says his favorite role was Fletch because it was the most like himself.
Oh, okay.
It let him be himself.
Yeah. I think I've heard that before, but I don't know. Chevy Chase is not an actor. He's a comedian. So, he has a shtick.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Just like Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler's not an actor, although he's gone into more serious acting, and I think he's done a good job sometimes. But yeah, I mean, Adam Sandler, when he's doing comedy, he's doing the Adam Sandler shtick. Same with Will Ferrell, which I love Will Ferrell, but Will Ferrell has a shtick. I mean, usually comedians, they're not actors. They're comedians, and they're there to make you laugh. They're not there to really play characters other than like the normal kind of characters they play all the time.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I would say he is pretty much being himself, but I do think this character is a little bit different than like a Clark Griswold, or even like the character he plays in Funny Farm, which I can't remember the name of that character at the moment. But yeah, I wouldn't completely disagree with that, I guess.
Okay. Well, the flip side, just to give equal treatment here, is Dwayne Burge from the Hollywood Reporter, who has almost completely the opposite approach to it, who says, with his glib, low-key assurance, Chase is hilarious as the laid-back but tenacious newspaperman. Mm-hmm. Screenwriter Andrew Bergman, adapting from Gregory McDonald's best-selling novel, has deftly fashioned an uproarious vehicle for Chase's droll talents. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, the storyline weaves all over the place, but no matter. Chase's performance and a plethora of daft and witty situations carry it past some structural rough spots. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like, it's funny because on one hand you have Ebert saying Chase is the weak point, despite excellent locations, good supporting characters, and ingenious plot. And on the other side, you have Burge saying Chase is the strong point who pulls it through a weak story.
I think I read that review earlier, actually, because I remember bits and pieces of that. But yeah, I would say I would probably err more towards Chase. I mean, I get what Roger Ebert's saying, but at the same time, I mean, Fletch is definitely less aloof than like a Clark Griswold is. Clark Griswold is very aloof and is not always aware of what's going on around him, as far as what other characters think about the situations that they're in. And Fletch is more analytical. He's more, I mean, he's a detective. He's a little bit more attention to detail, I guess. So I think they're very different characters, but of course he brings his same sensibilities to them. And I do think he is kind of the strong point of this movie. So I'd fully agree with, what is his name? Chase. I'd fully agree with him.
Dwayne Burge.
Dwayne Bird. Where'd I get Chase from?
I don't know. Chevy Chase.
Oh yeah, Chevy Chase.
All right, man. Any other aspects of the movie you want to talk about before we move into the end credits here?
No. I mean, I think that covers it all.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, first we have the algorithm says. This is kind of a lightning round. Your quick responses. These are movies that various algorithms say, if you like Fletch, you will like these movies.
Ooh, I'm excited about this. I forgot you did this.
Yeah, I specifically pulled out almost all of the Chevy Chase roles because those were obviously the first ones to pop up. But
yeah,
it's a very niche list. Let's say that.
Okay. All right, so I got to give you I like or I don't like or I haven't seen it, right?
Yeah, I mean, just quick reactions. Okay. I like it. I don't like it. I don't know why the hell it's connected to this, that kind of thing.
Love it. All right, let's do it.
First up, The Three Amigos.
Love it. Own it.
Yeah.
Great film.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stripes.
I think I've seen it. It's okay. I'm not a huge Bill Murray fan.
Really?
Yeah, Bill Murray is... I like Bill Murray, but he's not up there with like Chevy Chase and Steve Martin for me. Bill Murray's very hit or miss for me, especially nowadays. Now, old Bill Murray is very funny.
See, that's really interesting. I'm the Bill Murray, Steve Martin above Chevy Chase, and you specifically said Steve Martin, so that's interesting.
Steve Martin's, he's up there with Chevy Chase for me. I love Steve Martin too. But yeah, especially nowadays, like, have you seen, I know this is supposed to be lightning round, but I'm going to derail you for
It's all good.
Have you seen Lost in Translation?
Of course.
So everybody, especially critics, love that movie. I've watched it 3 times, and every time I watch it, I hate it even more.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I can't stand it.
I love that movie.
I can't stand it. And I want to like it. That's why I've watched it 3 times. I want to like it so bad, and I cannot stand it. It's so depressing, and just, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth every time I watch it.
I can understand that. There's another Bill Murray movie I watched to review, and suddenly I'm going blank on the name of it.
Broken Flowers?
Yes, Broken Flowers. I mean, I like it, but I didn't love it. And there were people who were absolutely gaga over that movie.
Yeah. Who directed that?
Jim Jarmusch.
Jim Jarmusch, yeah. Another one of those kind of indie guys that makes movies that bore me.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it, but I didn't go gaga over it like some people did. So, all right.
Yeah.
Back on track here. Okay. We got 2 down. The Great Outdoors.
Haven't seen it.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me. It's not like
Dan
the most
Aykroyd,
popular,
right?
Dan Aykroyd and John Candy. Yeah,
John Candy. Mm-hmm.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Not a huge John Candy fan.
To quote a podcaster, I know I want to reach through this microphone and smack you in the face.
I know a lot of people love that movie. I've seen it once. It's been a while ago, but when I saw it, I remember saying, "Yeah, it's okay." Not bad.
Okay.
Again, I love Steve Martin. It's not my favorite Steve Martin movie, but yeah, I don't love John Candy, so I think that's what kind of turned me off on it.
Oh, God.
As far as funny fat guys go, I'm more of a Chris Farley guy.
Okay, all right. Brewster's Millions.
Haven't seen it.
Okay, that's Richard Pryor.
Right.
This one cracked me up. Cannonball Run 2.
Have not seen it.
And it cracked me up because it's referenced on The Good Place. Not the first one, but the second one, because it's a medium movie. Is how they describe it. It's referenced several times throughout the show.
Okay, I've watched most of season 1 and 2, but I haven't finished. I haven't gone any farther. If
they've gone to the medium place, it's one of the videos she has at the medium place, because it's not a good movie, it's not a bad movie, it's a medium movie.
Medium. Okay.
So the fact that it showed up on this, that it wasn't the first one, it was the second one, really cracked me up.
Okay.
Joe versus the Volcano.
I saw it a long time ago. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Fair
didn't leave an impression on me.
Okay. One Crazy Summer.
Never heard of it.
We did an episode about it.
Okay, well, sorry, I haven't listened to all your episodes, Rafe. Don't kill me. But I have listened to some. Sorry, I listened to a lot. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it. I had not seen it until we did that episode, so I don't blame you in the least. It was one that, and I'm a huge John Cusack fan. It's good. It's worth checking out.
It's John Cusack. That's probably why I haven't seen it.
You have an issue with John
I
Cusack?
don't hate John Cusack. No, Austin, my co-host, which you know Austin, he loves John Cusack. So I make it a point to hate John Cusack.
Okay, so you don't like John Candy and you don't like John Cusack. I don't know that we can be friends anymore.
I don't like Johns. I don't like people named John.
You're listening to a friendship disintegrate here on the podcast.
No, I don't hate John Cusack, but he's one of those guys that's just kind of there for me in movies. Okay. He doesn't have a lot of charisma, at least in my opinion.
I disagree, but okay. Last two.
Cusack guy.
Oh, I can't blame you there. Last two, and these are a little outlandish compared to the rest of the list. Romancing the Stone.
I love it. Own it.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit in this category, but okay, I don't care. I like it.
It is kind of funny at times, and it's an adventure. So yeah, I get where they're coming from there.
Okay, and finally, Spaceballs.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love Mel Brooks. Although it's not one of my favorite Mel Brooks movies, but it is very funny.
Really?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. My favorite is definitely Blazing Saddles, and then probably Young Frankenstein.
Well, I can't disagree with those two. Okay.
Yeah, and then
I would put Spaceballs at like 3 though.
Yeah, so. You're right. Spaceballs is probably 3. But those are my 2 favorite ones. Like I can rewatch those all day. Spaceballs. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but Spaceballs is a very good send up of Star Wars, but it's not up there with those other 2 in my opinion. I think it's just a slight grade below those 2.
Okay. All right, we always end with a pop quiz, 4 multiple choice questions that are inspired by the movie.
Before we go on, I hate to continue to interrupt you and derail you. Can I ask? I know you took out a bunch of Chevy Chase movies, but can I ask what those were?
Yeah. Yeah, give me just a second. I can pull those up.
Sorry, I'm your ass right
now. No, so the Chevy Chase movies, Fletch Lives.
Okay, love it.
Spies Like Us.
I don't love that movie. It's okay.
Okay. Caddyshack.
Yeah, gotta love it.
National Lampoon's Vacation.
Of course, all 4 minus European. It's okay.
Yeah, I like European.
I like European too, but it's definitely my least favorite of the 3.
And then Funny Farm.
Okay, yeah, Funny Farm's okay. All right, cool.
All right,
let's hear that pop quiz.
All right, ready for the pop quiz now?
I'm ready. Yes, sir.
Okay. Number 1, always like to kind of hit on alternate casting. Several other actors were being considered for the role of Fletch before director Michael Ritchie stood up for Chevy Chase. Right. Which of the following actors was not a consideration for the investigative reporter? So 3 of them were, 1 of them wasn't. A, Charles Grodin, B, Tom Selleck, C, Burt Reynolds, or D, Mick Jagger.
Well, I read about this earlier, so I kind of cheated. I know Charles Grodin was. I want to say Mick Jagger, but I feel like that I don't remember reading Mick Jagger, but I feel like that one is so wild it could be true. And then you said Tom Selleck, and who was the third?
Burt Reynolds.
Oh, Burt Reynolds was definitely in contention for this. I'm gonna go Mick Jagger.
Nope, Mick Jagger was actually in consideration. It was Tom Selleck. Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Charles Grodin would have been good as Fletch. I like Charles Grodin. He's pretty funny.
It would have been a very different character.
Sure.
And that's one of the things I like with this alternate casting is just consider what those versions would have been like. Yeah. I cannot picture it with Mick Jagger at all.
Oh my gosh, why would they even think about Mick Jagger? That's terrible.
This was the time period where Mick Jagger wanted to be an actor. Like, I feel like his name was thrown about half of the projects from the late 80s.
Really? Okay.
And then he was in Free Jack, which I think it was early 90s, and everybody went, yeah, that's just not a good idea.
No, it's not a good idea.
All right, number 2, the exterior of the Stanwyck house, most notably the fence and pool shown towards the end of the film, share a connection with one of Fletch's fake identities. What is the connection? A, it's the private estate of G. Gordon Liddy. B, it's the home of Jean de Brunhoff, the creator of Babar. Okay. C, it's the estate of Magic Johnson. Okay. Or D, it was used in the movie The Godfather.
I'm going to go with The Godfather. I'm going to go with D.
Yep, it was D.
Do you literally have a bell back there that you're ringing?
I do, and I keep forgetting to use it, so, you know.
I like it.
All right, number 3. Fletch originally had a second dream sequence like the one where Fletch plays for the Lakers. The contents of the dream sequence are still alluded to within the movie, even though the scene was cut. What did Fletch dream? A, he was a baseball player who was benched by Tommy Lasorda. B, he was a hockey player who went up against Wayne Gretzky. C, he was still an investigative reporter but won a Pulitzer for Jane Doe. And D, he was an unknown bassist who wound up filling in for the Ted Nugent band.
I want to say either. Did you come up with these questions and answers yourself?
Yes.
You did a great job. I want to say either C or D, because Ted Nugent was an alias he used. But I don't know. I could see him being as self-absorbed to think he'd win a Pulitzer. I'm going to go with C.
No, he was a baseball player who was benched by Tommy Lasorda, which is why he smashes the picture and says he hates Tommy Lasorda.
I remember that line, but honestly, because I was born in the 90s, I had no idea who Tommy Lasorda was.
Yeah, they're losing in the baseball game, and Tommy Lasorda walks out. They filmed this. Tommy Lasorda walks out to the mound and says, "Give me the ball." Basically saying, you're sitting, and he refuses to give him the ball, and the two end up wrestling on the ground over the ball.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember that. I didn't remember the name Tommy Lasorda until you just brought it back up, but I do remember that. So interesting. Very interesting.
All right, here's the most challenging one.
Okay.
Last question. When asked what comes to mind when he thinks of Fletch, what was Chevy Chase's 2-word answer? A, jelly finger. B, funny teeth.
Okay.
C, Magic Johnson. Or D, Underhill account.
Ooh, I'm going Magic Johnson.
No, it was funny teeth.
That was going to be my second guess. Okay. I like it. I guess he's thinking about the scene where he's looking at the airplane.
Yeah, he just loved the fact that they let him play around with wigs and funny teeth. That was one of his things. As I said, I'll send you the link to that interview. It's a really good interview with him.
Definitely.
All right, man, what do you want to promote? Where can people find you?
They can find me and my co-host Austin on Spotify or iTunes. Real Rundown. We have 3 shows a week. We're shooting the shit, talking about things we watched over the last week. We also do a movie review of a new movie, which is kind of hard right now. And then at the end of the week, we do an episode where we rank a top 10 or top 5 movies that are related to the movie we reviewed. But yeah, check us out. Real Rundown.
Fantastic, man. As I said, I hadn't seen this one before, so I really appreciate you introducing me to it. I had a great time watching it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you had not seen it and I could introduce you to this. So if you're gracious enough to allow me back on the show in the future, I'm going to make sure I find another film you haven't seen.
All right. Challenge accepted. So that does it for this week, but you can keep the conversation going throughout the week on social media. Share your thoughts about Fletch, or maybe tell me a movie you'd like to come on the show and talk about. You can find me at Talon Hess on Twitter, or the show at Have Not Seen This on Twitter. On Facebook, we're at Have Not Seen This Podcast, or email me at havenotseenthis@gmail.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the show so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, including next week's episode, which I'll sum up in just one word. Just one word. Are you listening? Plastics. Positive ratings and reviews are always welcome. And of course, head over to Podcatcher and review us there to help raise funds for Meals on Wheels. And we always appreciate just sharing the podcast with a friend and spreading the love. If you like World of Warcraft or other Blizzard Entertainment games, be sure to check out my other podcast, Citizens of Azeroth, a World of Warcraft podcast, also available through all major podcast sources. Special thanks to Chris Talent for our wonderful theme song, and thanks to Price for providing this week's conversation, and maybe our friendship can recover from it. Until next week, I'm Rafe Telsch, and this has been Have Not Seen This.